Okay, hello everybody and welcome back. We're now maybe in the Friday afternoon lull, but I want to keep the energy going. And I think we've got every reason to do so with this brilliant panel that we've got. We're going to be talking about animal welfare and competitiveness. The actual title of our panel discussion is How to Strike the Balance between those two things, between animal welfare and competitiveness. And to discuss this very important issue, I have three brilliant guests. So I'm going to introduce each of them and then hopefully just have a quick hello from them, which will also serve to check that their mics are working. So first of all, we've got a Finnish MEP, Sirpa Pietikäinen. She has been an MEP since 2008, so she certainly knows the European Parliament very well. She's a member of 3 committees, a full member that is, including the new Committee of Inquiry on the Protection of Animals in Transport, which has just had its first meeting this week. And Sirpa is also a substitute member on the Environment Committee. Sirpa, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Hello.
Brilliant. Hi. Secondly, we have Philip Limbury joining us from the UK. He is the CEO of Compassion in World Farming, which he has been since 2005. And he's also the author of several books on animal welfare across the world, somewhat of an investigative journalist as well, including one called Farmageddon, which is about the cost of cheap meat. He's been a campaigner against factory farming for many years. So Philip, how are you?
Great, Eddie. Thank you so much for having us along.
Brilliant. And we also have Juliette Protino, who is a French agronomist and a policy officer at the European Rural Poultry Association, ERPA, which was created in 2007. And the job of the ERPA, as I'm sure we'll hear, is to defend free-range, extensive, slow-growing, family-based methods of farming in the poultry sector. So, Juliette, welcome.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Brilliant. Okay, so just to start off, I think we could maybe just have the scene set by Philip. We know you've had many escapades across the world looking at the situation of animal welfare, but let's focus in on Europe, and we'll include the UK in Europe for the purposes of our discussions. What's the problem at the moment with animal welfare? I thought the EU in particular had fantastic standards. I thought this was the beacon of animal welfare for the world. So why is there so much campaigning for CIWF to be doing?
Well, the good news is that the European Union has acted on some of the worst systems and practices of animal involving farmed animals, such as barren battery cages for laying hens and narrow veal crates where tiny calves were kept in crates their whole life, where they couldn't turn around and kept in the dark. They've been banned. So some of the very worst systems have been banned, but generally factory farming still is the dominant way of keeping farmed animals in Europe, in the UK, in the world. And if anything, that dominance is just getting bigger. So actually, the issue of animal welfare in Europe is getting a bigger, more pressing issue. And it's not only about animal cruelty. It's not only the biggest issue of animal cruelty in Europe, it is also a major driver of wildlife declines, of nature collapse. It's a big contributor to climate change, and it's also a breeding ground for new and more deadly viruses. So the next pandemic is linked to the way we keep animals. That is why we've got to get serious as a European Union about animal welfare.
Okay, brilliant, Philip. Thank you so much for that introduction. I think that's really set the scene very well for us. Juliette, I mean, Philip mentioned there that I think that citizens are, it's becoming an increasing worry for citizens, animal welfare. Is that something that you're noticing? I think in France, especially, maybe you could tell us about the French position, the French situation right now. I think there's a lot of outcry about animal welfare. There's even a petition for a referendum on animal welfare in France.
Yes, actually, it's a big issue in France, but I think also in all the member states in Europe. I think that animal welfare is very one of the challenges in the next few years. Yes, in France we have a referendum for more animal welfare. That's why we have to support more all the producers and all the farming methods that encourage more animal welfare in the production systems, and that's what we represent at ERPA.
Okay, let's bring in our esteemed MEP guest now, Sirpa Pietikainen from the EPP group. I think I didn't mention that. Sirpa, you have just joined this new committee in the European Parliament on the protection of animals during transport. Tell us a little bit about this committee, because it's quite rare to have a committee popping up in the middle of a parliamentary term. So tell us what you'll be doing on that committee and tell us about it.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, we have these committees to study subjects that are very acute. The Animal Welfare Intergroup that I was chairing during the last mandate actually proposed it already then, and now we got it. And the point of it is to really study what is the situation of animal transportation within and outside the EU. And the most acute problems are in transportation to the third countries, where the practices can be totally cruel. Quite big number of the animals are dying. And then again, there are that kind of a crisis, like the COVID was the latest, and heat wave before that, where the system just doesn't work and the supervision doesn't work. And while the lorries and trucks need to stay on the line for hours and for days, the actual animal suffering is horrible, and the death rates. So the issue is to study what is the situation, what can be done, and then on what extent we could ban the animal transportation for food outside the EU. So the idea is breed animal friendly in EU and pack the meat and transport the meat, not the living animals.
Okay, that's very interesting. And that committee had its first meeting. I can't remember which day it was this week, but it was this week, and it's going to last for 1 year, 12 months. That committee, and then it will publish some recommendations. So we'll be definitely keeping tabs on it. Let's stick on the issue of animal transport, particularly to third countries. So animals which are raised in the EU and then packed off on huge ships and sent across the sea to the Middle East or sent to Turkey. Philip, I want to ask you, this question is: how much of an issue is this? Of course, we've got a European Parliament committee, but really, this is essential to the functioning of the food system, in its entirety, isn't it? So we can't really do away with animal transportation, can we?
Well, it is a huge issue, Eddie. Hundreds of thousands, millions of animals a year are caught up in this trade. And I think what we have to ask ourselves is, what century are we living in? Are we in the 21st century with refrigerators, with technology that allows us to go into outer space, that allows us to produce meat in bioreactors, or are we in the dark ages still, and putting live animals into trucks and sending them on hellishly long journeys across the European Union, out of the European Union, into war zones, into places where they are treated and killed in ways which are in abject contravention of the European law? Is that a necessity, or is that a cruel, cruel oversight, a hangover from a century or two past? I suggest we move away from this long distance transport. We get real. We grasp the fact that we are a civilization with technology at our fingertips, and stop acting like we are in the 19th century. It's not necessary, Eddie. It needs to stop.
Well, that's a very strong rallying cry to stop that trade. We'll have to see how realistic that is. But just to split the UK off from the rest of the EU and to stay with you, Philip, for a moment there. I think I've heard noises from the British government in the last few years about potentially having a different policy to the EU after Brexit on animal transport. Do you think that's likely? Do you think the UK will start to clamp down more on this kind of trade? Or will it be business as usual on that, in terms of that after Brexit?
Well, the good news, Eddie, is that we've just had a victory in Britain. Compassion in World Farming has been taking the Scottish government to court over its outdated, outmoded and unnecessary giving permission for calves to go on long distance journeys to be exported essentially to the European continent. And we felt that taking tiny young unweaned animals on such long journeys that could last up to 23 hours if they're going as far as Spain, which many of them do, was just the wrong thing to do. We took them to judicial review, and as part of that, what the Scottish government realised is that actually it is in contravention of their own rules to be sending animals on this long journey. So we've essentially shut down the remainder of the calf trade from Scotland to the continent. And this is a big deal. If you go back, because I've been doing this for 30 years now, if you go back 30 years ago, Britain was exporting 2.5 million animals a year to the European continent live. In what we have done through successive campaigning is driven that right down to under 100,000 a year. That's 100,000 too many, and now it will be fewer still because of this latest calf victory led by Compassion in World Farming. But it just shows, Eddie, to come back to your point of, is it realistic to end the live trade? Well, of course it is. The fact is that the vast majority of meat exports from the UK to the continent, from the European Union to the rest of the world, the vast majority, Eddie, go as a carcass trade, as a meat trade. What we're saying is, let's do the right thing and make it a 100% carcass only trade and stop this agricultural abomination, which is reminiscent of the Dark Ages.
Okay. I just want to, I'll make a slight plug for Politico's own journalism at this point, and I'll mention an article we published this week which revealed how some EU countries are in fact in contravention of EU animal transport laws. I think I shared it with some of the panelists, but we won't spend too much time on that. I just encourage you to look on our website and read about that. I also just need to make a slight segue here because I forgot to announce it at the beginning, that we have a poll currently running for all our viewers watching this, of which I'm told there are hundreds. We're lucky to have. So the poll is a pretty simplistic one. It's is the farm to fork strategy likely to seriously improve animal welfare? We want to get your predictions on that. And don't forget, you can also submit questions in our Q&A, and I would love to see a few of those coming in so I can put them to the panelists. Now, talking about the farm to fork strategy, or at least, talking about the farm to fork strategy, let's talk about labeling, because labeling is a big issue, certainly for the German presidency of the EU Council. And I want to talk to Juliette Pretino from ERPA about this. I think you also have a second job, which is working on labels as well. So what do you make of the German presidency's push for a mandatory, maybe not mandatory, that's still a point of contention, but a harmonized label across the EU for animal welfare? Do you welcome that?
Well, at ERPA, we really think that a clear information to the consumers is really crucial, so that they can make their own choices, knowing what they are buying. And we have to make these labels as clear and as understandable as possible, and also standardized. That means yes, they have to be harmonized between all the member states, so there is a level playing fields between countries. And we want to make sure that these labels are clear and uniform, and also because we think that these kind of labels have to value the real methods of production that encourage animal welfare and environment and good practices of husbandry. This is important because we can see that in Europe there is a lot of new initiatives that are a kind of in-between initiatives, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing for the consumers. So we call for a labeling which is very clear for the consumer and which value the good method of production with, for example, animal welfare and also outdoor access, slow growing breeds, for example, for birds. So that's very important.
That's great to hear your position on that. Let's throw it open to Sirpa. What are your views on? I think the ball will be thrown to the European Parliament at some point. Whatever is cooked up in the Council, it will be up to MEPs to decide on the labelling issue. So, where do you stand on that?
I'm standing very firmly on behalf of the labeling, because the consumers do have the right to know how the animals are treated, and for example, if they are having the free range possibility, so that they are outgrown, and we do have the possibilities and the species for that. The question is just like it is with organic animal husbandry and production, that we need to label it, we need to know it, and we need to certify it. But then again, I really would like to remind you that this doesn't expel the need to raise the level of animal welfare in general in our legislation. We would need to have the animal welfare frame legislation that recognizes what our treaties are saying, that animals are sentient beings and they should be treated as such, and this is not the everyday case in this kind of industry farming, and that yes, we do have to have the alternatives, and yes, this needs to be taken into account in not only in the common agricultural policy and on the levels of subsidies, but then on the international trade agreements. Now we are talking about the Mercosur, for example, in the future, because you can't import to the Europe animal products that are produced with poorer standards, and they are far cheaper than what is the European level. Yes, go further in European standards, label the excellent standards, and try to ban that kind of animal imports and meat imports that do not comply with European standards. And this is what we own, actually, to animals, because they are sentient beings. And I think that if the consumers would know all the cases how animals are actually raised, transported and slaughtered, it would have the impact on your appetite.
Well, it may well do. I wouldn't deny that. Let me ask you just one more question, Sirpa, because you mentioned the Mercosur trade agreement, and I did want to kind of broaden it out to kind of trade agreements at this point in the conversation anyway. Are you in the European Parliament going to be pushing for there to be more on animal welfare in Mercosur? Because the European Commission, in fact, John Clark, who was on this very stage just a few minutes ago, he has previously said that the Mercosur EU deal is the first to include an animal welfare section specifically in it, because it talks about shelled eggs, for example. So, is that enough? Will you be pushing for more in the Mercosur deal on animal welfare?
Well, the case is still out. We have to see what is the European Parliament's final position on these issues. But certainly I'm advocating, and there's a huge number of the MEPs that are advocating, that the levels needs to be raised, what we demand on the animal welfare. And we know, and this is not only the Mercosur and Brazilian case, many other parts, we need to look what kind of a pesticides, what kind of a treatment, what kind of a slaughter procedures, what kind of a feeding procedures. And this is, of course, the Amazon destruction that causes the climate change, and GMO soya production for the animal feed and so on. So you need to look the whole production chain, not only a specific silo issues here and there. And this is a big task. And we need to wake for that. The consumers need to wake for that. And you, coming from political, the journalist and the media needs to wake up for that so that we can push the discussion open. Because we shouldn't have a trade just by any level, because that doesn't benefit us. But I'm certain, and I hope we can improve it.
Thank you for the wake up call. Let's move it from EU Mercosur to UK US, because that's another huge potential trade agreement that is being talked up a lot at the moment. Philip, I know this is probably something that is occupying a lot of your time at the moment. But what would that mean, realistically for animal welfare? What could it mean for animal welfare standards in the UK if an agreement including farming is struck between the post-Brexit UK and America?
Well, the real risk is that US products that are produced to standards that would be illegal in the UK and Europe are allowed to flood the market. For example, hormone-treated beef or chlorinated chicken, general factory-farmed products that are even worse than in terms of animal welfare than those currently admitted in the UK and Europe. That's a real threat, and that's why we're saying to the UK government, you've said that animal welfare is important. It's important to UK citizens. It's a critical, important issue across the whole of Europe. So for goodness sake, make sure that there are concrete assurances that any trade deal will not allow products produced in ways that would be illegal to be imported into Britain. So don't sell down the river our producers and our better standards. They're not perfect standards by any means. They've got a long way to go before they are sustainable. But for goodness sake, let's not sell our soul to the devil by allowing in standards that are even worse.
I imagine, Sirpa, from where you're sitting in the European Parliament, obviously not right now because it doesn't look like you're sitting in the Parliament from your background, but from your position in the Parliament, if the UK and the US do an agreement, and if that agreement does lead to a lowering of standards on animal welfare in the UK, wouldn't that make it harder for the European Parliament to accept a possible deal with the UK?
Doesn't ease things up or facilitate. And this is really an unfortunate situation what we have, because we have I have had wonderful colleagues from Great Britain, and we have wonderful champions like in this panel from there. So it is not the battle between us human beings and good intentions, but a stupid political game that I really hope that it wouldn't lead to this kind of a pave the way to hell in lowering the standards. But if that is the case, I'm pretty certain that the European Parliament and Europe will not attend this competition, but it will react very promptly and strongly against that, because that is against all of the essence where the Europe is built on improving and betterment of lives of human beings and animals and social standards and all that. And it's really sad story to look aside.
Okay, we've only got about a minute left, so I just want to zoom in. Maybe we have got Juliette with us, and unless Juliette wants to talk about the major international trade negotiations and developments, which maybe she doesn't really want to, let's just finish by focusing in on the particular challenges of the poultry sector. We've talked about maybe bigger livestock animals that will be being transported around the EU, but I doubt that really necessarily pertains to poultry. So what's the next challenge for poultry in terms of becoming more, in terms of boosting those animal welfare protections? Just tell us a bit about that.
Well, we think that we can have a room for this poultry in the farm to fork strategy and the new CAP. So we hope that it will be a way to give more value to these kind of productions. As a representative of rural poultry, that means extensive outdoor farming with slow growing breeds. We really think that we meet all the citizens' expectations, all the EU citizens' expectations. And because we meet all the expectations about animal welfare, environment, sustainability, farmers' incomes, everything. But what we regret for example, in the draft of the new CAP is that even if animal welfare is mentioned on several occasions, it's still a bit vague, and we don't really see how we can be valued in this regulations. So we call for better incentive and financial aids resources for example, with bonuses for farmers who go beyond the basic regulation and who do a lot in animal welfare and environment. So we hope that these new regulations will really encourage these methods of production, and particularly, of course, in poultry productions.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's a really good way to end it off. I suppose that does touch on the issue of competitiveness and the need to incentivize farmers to actually raise these standards, which we've all talked about, and all three of the panelists have agreed among themselves, among yourselves, that they need to be raised. So I think we'll leave it there. We've had a very wide-ranging discussion, ranging from animal transport to what's going on in the corridors of Brussels, what the future trading positions of the UK, the US, and even Brazil could lead to on animal welfare. So thank you so much to Finnish MEP Sirpa Pietikainen, CEO of Compassionate World Farming Philip Limbury, and Juliette Pretino from the European Rural Poultry Association. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think now we need to. Well, we could announce the results of our poll, but I haven't got that in front of me, so we'll have to leave that. But it just remains to announce the next event, which will be starting in a few minutes' time, which is a panel discussion on gene editing entitled "Controversy or Necessity? What is the future?" So stay tuned to find out what the future is in the short future in 10 minutes' time.